Okay, so thanks for joining me, Susan. And I'll do a presentation today on our tour called Gringo Viejo. It's the third tour that I'm leading in the winter of 2025. Um, just about me, my name's Lee Orphan. I've been to Cuba off and on for 15 years. I've led 8 bike tours for Peter with Bicycle Breeze. Um, and this one is a variation on one I've done before, Fat Mary. So I haven't actually done this specific loop, but there's only 1 or 2 days that are very slightly different from what I've done in the past.
Okay.
Uh, yeah, the presentation's 20 minutes, and there's time for Q's and A's at the end. So as I say, this presentation is about the tour called Gringo Viejo, which is a tour of Western Cuba. There's a picture of my buddy Rob cycling on the coast road heading towards Maria LaGuardia. The company Bicycle Breeze has been around for over 20 years. It's run by Peter Marshall and his wife Anna out of Havana, and they've been, as I say, running it for over 20 years. It's one of the probably the most established company in Cuba. The tours are aimed to be relaxing and energizing, so we make sure that we blend the cycling with some sightseeing, whether we're in a small town or a big city. The tour guide gives us a walk around, an explanation of the sights and the culture of Cuba. And we do a bit of time on the beach, which is always a fun thing to do. The tours are fully supported, which means that there's 100% coverage of an air-conditioned bus that follows us all day long while we're cycling. So it can provide us with bottled water and snacks along the route. As I say, there's a Cuban cultural tour guide that's usually going to be Corral this year. Super nice guy that is very knowledgeable about Cuba. You can ask him anything about Cuba and what it's like to be a Cuban and how they really get by, and he'll give you the goods. There's also a tour leader, which is me in this case, bike mechanic Ioani. We consider him the best bike mechanic in Cuba, and of course, a bus driver. The tour prices are at the end, but they're in the vicinity of 3,000 US for the bike tours. And in addition to that is going to be airfare and some spending money. And bike rentals are available, and that's an additional cost. They vary from most people go with a hybrid, which is $15 a day, but there's also e-bikes, gravel bikes, etc. Okay. So one of the things that I've always liked about these tours is that we support Cuban youth cyclists. So Bicycle Breeze, that's a picture of Peter there and some young women from the Las Tunas Cycling Club. In Cuba, they have a school system that includes sports schools. Each province has a sports school where they have their regular education, but they also train in their own program. The schools are completely dependent on donations. The bicycles they have been donated over the years, but they need equipment to keep them going. So, in particular, things that wear out, like tires, tubes, saddles, handlebar tape, anything that wears out is something that they need. We encourage people to bring donations, but it's of course not mandatory. A lot of people talk to their friends, bike shops, and others, and manage to put together a small amount of stuff to bring. It's also great to bring other donations, like right now, things like acetaminophen, like Tylenol, baseball hats, clothing. All of those things are appreciated. This is the loop, Gringo Viejo. The map itself is actually Fat Mary Tour, but it's very similar. The difference is Gringo Viejo doesn't start in Matanzas. It starts in Havana. So from Havana, we head west to Maria LaGuardia. And along the way, we visit some really neat sites, and as I go through the next slides, you'll see some pictures of the places we go, like the El Contento Trail, which is in Las Terrazas, and Pinar del Rio, the Pinales Valley, etc. The tour is from March 8th to 20th in 2025. Here's a picture of a vintage car that we saw last year, and we'll take a car ride along the Malecon on the first day that we're in Havana, and we'll also do a bit of cycling in Havana. This is a copy, a picture of our tour group, Fat Mary, from a few years ago, and the tour bus that rides with us. And here's a picture of some youth cyclists. So on the first day cycling, we'll go to Mariel, which is just on the west side of Havana, and meet a youth cycling club there. As we head further west, we end up at the um, oops, Anglerona coffee plantation ruins, and we'll stop there and have a box lunch. We move on to Las Terrazas, which is just on the edge of the Sierra Rosario biosphere, and we'll have a hike on the El Contento Trail. There's the Las Terrazas is sort of an eco park. They have some really neat. It's of interest. It's actually a large part of it's a pine forest. So as we move along the Sierra Rosario, it's got a slightly different climate than the hot tropical parts of Cuba. A lot of it's got pine trees and a little cooler. So this is Saroa, where we'll visit an orchid garden. There's, I think it's 18,000 different orchid species in the orchid garden. This garden was built. It was built a few decades ago by a man who built it as a tribute to his daughter. It's absolutely spectacular. We'll move on to Cueva de las Portales, which is where Che Guevara set up his headquarters during the Cold War, during the Cuban Missile Crisis. At the back of that picture in the cave, there's a sort of a concrete block structure, which was his office. We'll cycle through the Vinales Valley. The Vinales Valley is perhaps the prettiest part of Cuba. The hills in the background are what's left after limestone plateau eroded away. And so they're called magotes. You don't actually cycle over them, you cycle around them. So the road's pretty flat, but it's gorgeous scenery the whole way. In Vinales, we'll have dinner at an eco farm. It's a farm to fork uh, restaurant. You can see on the right of the picture there is the vegetable garden where they grow the vegetables. In the background are some magotes and the town of Vinales. And that's one of our tour groups enjoying dinner. From Vinales, we'll cycle to Coyotes, and it's a spectacular spot right on the white sand beaches. The restaurant you can see in the picture overhangs the Atlantic Ocean, which is just there on the right. We'll get a great meal there. There's also, of course, the chance to have a swim before or after lunch. In Vinales, you're in the middle of cigar making territory. So that's our friend Benito. He has a large cigar factory. He's pretty famous in Cuba. He advises the government on tobacco growth and the cigar industry. And Benito will give us a demonstration of rolling a cigar, smoking a cigar that he just rolled. And then we'll cycle through Pinar del Rio to Maria La Gorda. And this is an example of one of the roads in Cuba that's slightly more rough because it's essentially a dead end road to Maria La Gorda. But yeah, that's about as bad as the roads get in Cuba. Maria La Gorda is right at the western tip of Cuba. You can snorkel off that little concrete pier. There's little fish all around the base of it. And we'll also have the option of possibly chartering a dive boat and going off and seeing some of the reefs slightly offshore. The other option for that day is to go for a cycle down the beach and have lunch down the beach and then come back. After Maria La Gorda, we'll return back to Havana and do a walking tour of Havana Vieja, the old town. Spectacular. It's been completely rebuilt over the last 20 years and restored. Just a fantastic space to wander and see some museums and restaurants and bars. And we'll have a final dinner in Havana. That's a picture from El Torre, which is a restaurant on, I think it's the 32nd floor of the Foxa building. And that's, it's the beautiful skyline of Havana at night. The other two tours I'm leading, I'll just quickly describe them. Um, the first one I'll mention is the Fat Mary Tour, which is the first one I'm leading. It's January 25th to February 8th. This one is already a go. We've got more than the minimum number of riders. So this one's going to happen for sure. This is very similar to the Gringo Viejo tour I just went over, except that it begins in Matanzas, where the green dot is, follows that similar route before coming back to Veradero. This route's a 15-day tour, whereas Gringo Viejo is a 13-day tour. That's another difference. Okay. The third tour I'll mention is Colonial Cities and Beaches, and it runs from February 15th to March 1st. And it's a completely different loop. So this one begins and ends in Havana. But from there, we'll take a bus to Hagway Grande. So it's a counterclockwise version of that loop. We'll cycle down to Playa Heron, which is the Bay of Pigs. That's where the invasion happened back in 1961, I believe it was. We'll cycle into Cienfuegos, which is a gorgeous colonial town. From there down to Trinidad, and we'll visit Playa Ancon, a beach there for a beach day. Then we cycle up to Lake Hanabania, where we'll spend 2 nights because we're going to do a really neat hike in the mountains around Lake Hanabania and have a lunch lakeside. We'll cycle up to Santa Clara, which is where Che Guevara ended the war by attacking an armored train. In defeating the government forces there the next day or that night, the president escaped Cuba, left Cuba, and decided the war was over. We'll cycle into Caibarien and then take a bus to Cayo Santa Maria, which is at the end of a little red line there, where we'll spend 2 nights on the white sand beach of Cayo Santa Maria. The beach at Cayo Santa Maria is spectacular. The sand is so fluffy and soft that when you walk on it, you sink in 3 or 4 inches in some cases. We'll then take the bus back to Colon, cycle to Matanzas, and then on and spend a night there before we cycle to Hibacoa and drive into Havana to end the tour. So that loop, we call it Colonial Cities because we visit 6 significant colonial cities and a couple beaches on the way. So just in summary about the tours, any of them, typically the riding distances are 25 to 100 kilometers a day, so around 15 to 60 miles. Out of a 15-day tour, 10 days would be cycling. On the 13-day tour, it's 8. Show you some pictures of the terrain. And I find the roads in Cuba are very similar to North America in the quiet, on a quiet back road around where I live in Ontario. Cuba looks a lot like that. Occasionally it's worse. There's definitely some more potholed roads. And for that reason, we recommend tires at least 28 millimeters, so 1.25 inches or wider. All of the rental bikes have wider tires like that. E-bikes are becoming super popular. Usually there's 2 or 3 people on each tour on an e-bike. And in one tour, it was up to about 80% of the people on e-bikes. And we managed to integrate them really well. Sometimes I think people are a bit concerned that e-bikes and regular bikes can go at different speeds, but we manage that the same way we manage faster riders. The tour guide will stay at the front with whoever the fastest riders are and make sure they stay on the course. The bus stays behind the last rider on the road. And I usually cycle up and down in the middle of the group and just talk to people, make sure everyone's comfortable. Every 20 kilometers, we stop and regroup. The bus comes up and resupplies people with bottled water and whatever snacks we've got on the bus. I covered what we mean by 100% supported. The prices, which are at the bottom of the page there, include all the accommodations and most meals. It doesn't include some of the lunches when we're cycling on the road, just because it's just an unknown as to what we'll do. Sometimes we'll stop at a restaurant along the way, and sometimes we'll pack a sandwich or a box lunch and have that along the road. Airfare is not included because people fly from all over the world to do the tours. And there's the prices. They're typically around just under $3,000. That's in US for double occupancy. And the single supplement is either $300 or $350 for the tour. So thanks very much. My name's Lee Orphan. As I said, the tour leader for these 3 tours in January to March 2025. I'd love for people to stay in touch with me. There's my email address with Bicycle Breeze and the company website.
So the people that are using the e-bikes, how are they charging their batteries?
Yeah, every night we stop when we stop at a hotel, um, we'll recharge the batteries there.
And
So
do the majority of people rent bikes or do they bring their own bikes?
yeah, great question. The majority rent. I'll take my own bikes. I'm going to be there for almost 3 months,
Mhm.
but most people rent. Oh, and I see Robert's joined us. Hi, Robert. And you were mentioning, Susan, you haven't been to Cuba before. Did you have any other questions about what it's like to be there and get around?
Not really. I'm here that the food is pretty plain, which is good for me. So yeah, lots of fruit and vegetables, I'm assuming.
Yes. So yeah, the meals very commonly for breakfast, it's going to be something like eggs, toast, fruit. For lunch, if we're stopping, usually a lunch is very similar to a dinner if you go to a restaurant. And in Cuba, pretty much any meal is going to be either pork, fish, chicken, or beef as the main. And then there'll be rice congri, which is like a rice bean dish, and a green salad. So lunches would be something like that. Dinners are fairly similar. And as you said, the food, it tends to not be very spicy. It's not like going to Mexico.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
And
no,
then I was just asking, what's the
uh,
age of the people that are usually on tours?
so age, yeah. I mean, we've had, people from, 18 to 80, but super commonly sort of people in their 50s, 60s, and 70s.
Yeah.
Seems to be the main demographic. I'm 62, so
Yeah.
yeah,
Okay.
which it works out well for everyone to be, comfortable with each other. We always have really good groups. The dynamics in our groups have always been fabulous, and the staff of Bicycle Breeze are really great people. They're all good friends of mine.
So what do you consider a full tour? What's the usual number of people on a tour?
Yeah, so our minimum is 10 is 10 to make a
Okay.
tour a go, and the maximum is around 20. I think we've gone as high as 22, but yeah, somewhere between 10 and 20.
So how do you know what kind of a bike you're going to get if you decide to rent a bike?
Yeah, so it's a personal preference thing. The fleet that Peter has, he has a lot of bikes, like almost 100.
Okay.
Um, Most people go with a hybrid, and he's got Fuji hybrids. It's an aluminum frame, triple chain ring on the front, so the gearing's wide. It's got a straight handlebar, which a lot of people prefer, especially on a tour. It means you're sitting more upright and you get to see the scenery really well. You're not looking at the handlebars.
Hmm.
So probably 80% do that. Gravel bikes are becoming more popular. He's got about 10 of those. I ride a gravel bike because I just like the multiple hand positions on a racing bar. But
Yeah.
that's me and maybe 10, maybe another one or two people per tour on that. The e-bikes are essentially hybrid bikes, except battery powered. They go about 25 to 28 kilometers an hour maximum, and they generally have enough juice to get you through the day. And if we run out, because Peter's got only 2 or 3 of those, if we run out of those, he rents e-bikes that are based on a mountain bike design.
Okay.
A little slower, but maybe a bit more
Yeah.
comfortable, more plush too.
When I did the Cycle Canada tours, I was on my road bike. But the last time I did a tour on my own, I rode from Jasper to Saskatoon, but I was on my cyclocross bike. So I like the cyclocross because I can have wider tires,
Yeah,
fenders.
yeah.
Yeah. So,
You won't need fenders in Cuba. The
okay.
January to March, it almost never rains. I'll say that, and it'll rain like heck this year. But if it rains in that January to March period, it's usually, for 10 minutes. Occasionally we'll get a rain day, but it's pretty rare, pretty rare.
Okay.
So, yeah, well, gravel bikes are great. One of the couples that's going to come on the Colonial Cities tour, they're both going to ride gravel bikes because that's their preference. They're a little
Okay.
more. So the hybrids are $15 a day. I think the gravel bikes are $30 a day. But if you prefer that kind of a bike, it's the way to go. Robert, did you have any questions?
I think Susan probably covered most of the questions I would have. I'm not sure which tour I'd be taking, Lee, but they all sound exciting, especially the one where you got the dancing and the music. Is that part of one of these tours?
Yeah, I mean, they all have that. So wherever you go in Cuba, you're always going to be finding music. Like Cubans just love music. It's just
Yeah, yeah,
everywhere, right? So
yeah.
any of the towns or cities we visit, there'll be music during the afternoon and during the day. You
I
might
see.
have seen pictures of Trinidad. In Trinidad, there's a place called Cafe de la Musica, which is an outdoor patio area.
Oh
It's
yeah,
gorgeous. It's cobblestones, and there's like 1 or 2 hundred people gather there every night, and there's live music and dancing there. That's like the biggest event. Of course, Havana's got tons of opportunities. Um, yeah, you've definitely a lot of our clients. That's something they're looking for is the music and the
yeah,
dance. I have to learn how to dance myself someday. I've got like 2 left feet. All right.
yeah.
Well,
Nice to
thanks
meet
both.
you.
Yeah,
Yeah, and
nice meeting
Susan.
you both.
Take care.
Yeah, take care. Have a great evening. Hope to see you
Okay,
in
you
Cuba.
too. Bye bye.
Bye. Sorry we started without you. And let me just pull up the presentation and we'll get started.